All right, let's talk about interest rate cuts. We usually think of them as great news, right? Cheaper loans, lower mortgage payments, it all sounds good. But what if I told you that rate cuts are actually a huge warning sign? That's what we're digging into today. The idea that when central banks start cutting rates, it means the big economic machine is starting to show some serious cracks.
And really, it all boils down to this one simple, powerful idea. Rate cuts only happen when something in the economy is breaking. Think about it. Central banks aren't just handing out cheaper money for fun when everything's booming. No way. They cut rates as a response, as medicine, when they see real trouble on the horizon. It's a reaction to a problem, not a celebration.
Okay, so if that's true, it begs the obvious question, right? What exactly is breaking right now in 2026? If policymakers are reaching for the rate cut lever, what are the specific problems they're so worried about that they're trying to patch up? Let's put on our detective hats and investigate. So for our investigation, we've pinpointed 7 key stress points. You can think of them as 7 distinct cracks forming in the foundation of the economy. We're going to go through them one by one to really get the full picture of what's going on under the hood. First up, crack number 1, corporate earnings are getting weaker. I mean, when you see major companies like Shopify reporting that sales are slowing down, that's not just their problem. It's a huge signal that you, me, all of us, the consumers, are starting to pull back on our spending. And you can bet that's a massive red flag for central banks. All right, crack number 2 is the labor market. Now, it's not like it's falling off a cliff or anything, but it is definitely noticeably softening. We're seeing fewer job openings out there, more companies are putting a freeze on hiring, and wage growth just isn't what it used to be. It's exactly this kind of slowdown that makes policymakers start to get nervous.
Okay, number 3 is a big one, you guys. Credit is getting tighter. And you have to think of credit as the oil that keeps the entire economic engine running smoothly. So when banks get more restrictive and it suddenly gets harder for businesses and people to borrow money, the whole machine just slows down. And we're already seeing the strain with more and more people falling behind on their payments.
Next up, crack number 4 is a real classic recession signal. Manufacturing is contracting. When you look at the data, things like the Purchasing Managers Index, you see that companies are getting fewer new orders and their warehouses are full of stuff that just isn't selling. This sector has always been the canary in the coal mine, warning us that bigger trouble might be coming for the rest of the economy. And that brings us to crack number 5, what a lot of people are calling a slow-moving crisis: commercial real estate. This isn't some big, loud explosion. It's more like a slow, painful grind. You've got office buildings sitting empty at record rates, and the cost to refinance these properties is just brutal right now. But the real kicker? It's the regional banks that are on the hook for a lot of this debt. And that risk is a huge reason policymakers are looking at rate cuts. They're trying to prevent a domino from falling. Number 6, remember all that extra cash people had saved up after the pandemic? Well, it's gone. Consumer savings are pretty much depleted. We're back to pre-2008 savings rates. And at the very same time, credit card debt has hit an all-time high. People are turning to buy now, pay later services just to get by. This is a massive flashing red light for consumer spending down the road. And finally, crack number 7. And honestly, this is the one that really ties this whole story together. Look, the whole point of raising interest rates was to cool down inflation, right? And hey, it's working. But here's the catch, the big catch. Overall economic growth is cooling down even faster than inflation is. And that is the exact scenario that forces a central bank's hand. When the fear of a recession becomes bigger than the fear of inflation, they have no choice but to pivot and start cutting rates. So we've laid out all 7 cracks. We've seen all the evidence. So what's the final diagnosis here? What's really, truly breaking?
Well, it's not one single thing. We're not looking for another Lehman Brothers moment this time around. The problem is what experts call a systemic deceleration. It's this broad, creeping slowdown that's hitting multiple parts of the economy all at the same time. It's not a sudden crash. It's more like the entire machine is just grinding to a much, much slower pace. And you can see it right here. Every single crack we talked about, from corporate profits and the job market all the way to real estate and consumer spending, they're all just symptoms of this one big problem. The slowdown is happening everywhere. And the rate cuts, that's the medicine they're prescribing for the illness.
Okay, so that's the diagnosis, but what does any of this actually mean for you, for your investments? How are you supposed to navigate a market where good news, a rate cut, is actually a sign of weakness? Let's get into the takeaway.
Now, this is where it gets super interesting, because this kind of environment usually triggers a pretty predictable rotation in the market. Those high-flying growth stocks that everyone loves, they often stall out or even get their valuations cut down to size. Even safe defensive stocks can take a breather. The real action starts to shift. Suddenly, value stocks and cyclical companies, the ones that do well when the economy eventually recovers, start to look a whole lot more appealing. And look, this isn't just some theory from a textbook. You can literally see it playing out in the market right now. The huge Mag 7 stocks have kind of hit a wall. Those exciting growth names like Palantir and Shopify are getting reevaluated by investors. And at the same time, value-oriented stocks like Upwork, for example, are starting to get more attention from people who are looking for what's next. The macro story is lining up with these market moves.
So understanding this whole systemic deceleration thing is really the key. It tells you why rates are being cut, and it gives you a roadmap for how different parts of the market might react, which of course leads us to the next big question we have to ask ourselves: which specific sectors are set to benefit the most as this new cycle plays out?